Hi, Victoria. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much
I'm
for doing this with me. And
I'm so excited.
me too. Also, I really need Barnes& and Noble to send me that intro video because that was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
That was amazing. The music really got me hyped.
Yeah, I was like, oh, I'm ready to write the third one.
Well, congratulations on, yeah, I really, really enjoyed this book. And congratulations on hitting the NYT list at #1.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. I mean, nothing is ever guaranteed. And you very much are like, okay, this is the one where, I've had a lot of great luck up until right now. Like, let's get the Band-Aid ripped off. And somehow people are still extremely supportive, and this book is finding readers in a way I never really thought possible, and that's really, really lovely. It's also great you have the book in front of you because I'm in a cabin in Montana with lots of big dogs running around. I don't have my book with me, so thank you for having.
I'll keep holding it up.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, like fair warning, like an animal may appear right here.
Well, it's very stormy here, so hopefully you can't
Oh,
hear the rain coming down.
good.
So yeah, welcome to everybody who's here. Welcome to our chat, very kindly hosted by Barnes& and Noble. My name is Vanessa Len. I'm the debut author of Only a Monster, and we are here, of course, to celebrate Victoria Aveyard's amazing new book, Blade Breaker, which is the sequel to the also amazing Realm Breaker. I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping up front and say that if you bought a book as part of your admission, your signed copy will be mailed after the event, and you should get it in about 8 to 10 business days. Victoria and I are going to have a chat for about half an hour, and you can type questions into the Q&A box. And if you're really keen to see one of them answered, upvote it, and we'll hopefully see it anyway. All right, let me introduce Victoria properly. Victoria Aveyard is a screenwriter and the author of the best-selling series Red Queen and the best-selling series Realm Breaker, which includes Blade Breaker. And we are very excited to celebrate it today. Victoria's books have been translated into more than 40 languages. Wow, and still counting. Yeah, congratulations and welcome, Victoria. I'm so happy to be chatting today. I love this book so much, so I had all these questions. I'm really excited to get to ask them.
Thank you. That's very flattering to hear. I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for doing this with me. I do really appreciate it. I know sometimes, we can be really sick of staring at ourselves on the Zoom camera. So thank you for giving me some of your time today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I was really looking forward to this. So yay. So I was wondering if we could start off just with your pitch for the series, and yeah, for Blade Breaker in particular.
Yeah. So I like to pitch the Realm Breaker series as Lord of the Rings meets Guardians of the Galaxy. And I find that really like locks people into, okay, here's what I should expect. Because it's the number one thing when you're trying to tell someone a story is you want them to go in expecting what you're going to give them. The worst thing is when you pick up a book and you think it's one thing and you want that one thing, and then that book isn't. Because it wasn't presented to you that way. And that's not your fault, and that's not the author's fault. It always just sucks when that happens. So I always try and set the stage in a certain way. So Lord of the Rings meets Guardians of the Galaxy. I really loved Lord of the Rings growing up, especially as a teenager, but it was definitely a series that didn't feel like it had room for me. I mean, pretty much anyone who isn't a straight white man can be in the Fellowship of the Ring. So after the Red Queen series, which had a phenomenal amount of support and basically gave me, carte blanche to write whatever I wanted to write next, and my publisher would support me. That was a lot of pressure, obviously a fantastic position to be in, but I had to ask myself that question of what do I want to do next? And it was like, well, what did I love as a kid and what did I want to read? And I wanted to read a Lord of the Rings with me in it. So this is my sort of attempt to communicate with that. And it revolves around the question of like what happens when the heroes fail. So the setup of Realm Breaker is someone is trying to take over the world, and the band of the usual noble heroes set out to stop him and all die. But the world still needs saving. So like what happens next? Who's the B team of saving the world? And that's what Realm Breaker is about. I get to have a lot of fun centering my own fellowship on a teenage girl who's not necessarily good at holding a sword, but she's the only person who can save the world somehow. So she's got to collect some people to help her do it. And they're all very much on a wide spectrum of good to bad.
Oh my gosh, I have to say, I went into this not knowing what the story was going to, like what the premise was. I was so shocked by that prologue in a really good way. I couldn't believe it. Love that premise. Love that prologue.
Thank you. Oh, good. I know, and rightfully so, many people have said like that prologue is a slog. And it's kind of designed to be that way, but I totally get it. And so many people had said, I started taking notes about all the names and then I didn't need them at all.
No, I had no idea that was going to happen. I was just reading it in shock.
Oh, good, I got you.
I'm really curious what the first seeds of this were for you. Did you start with that premise, I guess, after you had that feeling that you wanted to write an epic fantasy, or did you come up with the characters first or the world building?
I'm very much like a concept person first. And what kind of story do I want to tell and who is the center of it? I need to have those two very basic, like overarching things to know what I want. And then I have to go to the world building. I can't really tell the story unless I know the world really well first. I can know what kind of story and what the beginning is, what the pitch is, but I'm not going to be able to tell you the whole thing until I know the setting of where it is. So I very much knew, Lord of the Rings meets Guardians of the Galaxy. A teenager is leading her own kind of fellowship of misfits in a world where the heroes have failed. And I want it to be in sort of a medieval fantasy world based on Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, sort of the Mediterranean sphere. And those were my parameters. And then I was able to world build.
That is really interesting. I feel like, I'm the same. I definitely come up with a premise first, and then the world building. I'm really curious. I'm always really curious about how people work. Did you have this percolating for a while you were writing the Red Queen series? Were you starting to develop the world building during that time, or was it more that it was something sitting in the back burner waiting?
A little bit of all of those things. I went back in my emails to find the first time I emailed my agent about Realmbreaker, and I think it was towards the end of 2018. So the idea came to me while I was still writing the Red Queen series. I think it was probably in Warstorm that the idea first came, but of course we have deadlines, we have contracts. One of the beauties of those things, though, is when you get an idea for another story and you can't immediately go to it because you have something else on your plate, it either disappears eventually, you don't come back to it, so it kind of fades away. And then there are stories that stay and keep continuously like tapping you on your shoulder. And people will ask, well, how do you know what you want to write next? I'm like, it's the stories that keep tapping on your shoulder and say, hey, I'm next. Because there have definitely been ideas that have come and gone, and I've been like, I really wasn't connected to that the way I thought I was. Cool concept, but not for me, that sort of thing. And I've had a couple of them now that have been tapping on my shoulder for a while, and Realmbreaker was the one that I really wanted to tackle after Red Queen, and also made more sense for who I am as a writer and where I am in my career. So it took a long time. If 2018 was the first time I emailed my agent, I probably had about a year before that where it was bouncing around in my brain, and then we started planning. And at least with my agent, when we sit down and plan, we plan in 5-year spans. People don't really understand that the publishing schedules are built so far out, like years and years for books sometimes. So it was, okay, we're going to finish up Red Queen in 2019. 2020, you will not publish a book. You're going to take as much time as you can to write this first Realmbreaker book, ramp it, build it up, and launch it in 2021. Now, we decided all of that years before the pandemic. So in hindsight, we look really, really smart for not having a book out in that year. Thank God. But it was a lot of a very long form macro calendar that freaked the hell out of me. I was like, I'm going to be 32 in this book. And now I'm going to be 32 in 20 days.
Oh, happy birthday. Oh, me too. Oh, mine is in 8 days.
Hey, happy birthday to you as well. That is something like people don't realize how far out these books are built. So when people say, oh, you copied that book that came out 6 months ago, or you were jumping on this trend, it's like these books were making for years, and it's the same can be said in either direction.
Well, I would love to talk about the characters. I don't know what this says about me, but I really love Erida.
Oh, good. Me too. I had a lot of fun with the characters in this story. And I'm generally like a world and a plot person. People ask, oh, are you plot? Are you character? What do you put the most emphasis on? What is most important to your stories? And I'm the first one to say like world and plot. But I love the characters in this story because they're just so much fun. I had so much fun building them and picking them and thinking, okay, I want a bounty hunter. I want an assassin. I want an immortal. How do I make those things interesting, but also familiar? And I want the evil queen. With Erida, she was really fantastic and surprising because when I was outlining the first book, that's when I realized I knew everything about her, knew who she was in the plot and what she would represent and what kind of obstacle she would be. But I didn't realize until I was outlining and about to start drafting, I actually need her POV. I need to be in her head for part of the story. And that kind of cracked open writing Realmbreaker for me, is discovering that I was going to track her as much as I was tracking, the heroes, and getting to see her arc and her development and how she makes her choices was really, really gratifying. I mean, we love writing characters, partially because we live in reality and have to act within the bounds of society. And then we have characters who don't, and that is so much fun.
I feel like one of the things I really love about Erida is just, she's such a survivor. I feel like she and Coraine are such foils for each other. They're almost faced with the same issues. They've both got to survive in this really tough world that we just saw all these heroes die in. And so you just see them making these really different choices, and yet almost for the same reasons, they've really got to survive. And I don't know, I just love that. I love the two of them kind of working against each other, but yet I feel like they've got some similarities as well.
Erida is definitely also like an outlet for so much of my female anger that has been, with all of our angers, growing over the last few years, and getting to write her feels very therapeutic. So much of this whole story feels very cathartic to me. I started writing it before the pandemic and during some really tumultuous political times, and then through the pandemic, so things were crazy, and it felt really wonderful to have this truly escapist story that I could live in and control and make sense of. And I've realized I never set out to like have a motif or a message or some kind of theme, something I'm trying to tell the audience, because I think my first job is to entertain. No matter what message I have, if it's not entertaining to the audience, they're not going to get it. So I need to entertain and then figure that out. And I've been figuring out, without knowing it, that sort of subconsciously, this story is working out my frustration with the world's inability to put aside differences and attack problems that we are going to affect all of us. It just blows my mind that something like climate change is so controversial when it's just like, no, this is happening and it's going to happen to everyone, and you're just choosing not to do anything about it for no good reason. Why is that? So this story is so much about people who are different, who have different ideas and different goals, seeing something terrible coming down the path and deciding, okay, all of that we can put aside for now, but we're gonna deal with this. So yeah, that's my wishful thinking in this story.
I feel like one of the other things that really came out for me was, this is an epic fantasy, and traditionally, like as you said in Lord of the Rings, a lot of these roles are just filled by men. But I really noticed that there were so many character spaces filled by women in this book. Mm-hmm. The chosen one, Coraine, is a woman. Sarasa, this hard-bitten warrior/assassin, is a woman. And then Erida as the villain. Was that something that you'd had in mind, or was that kind of a serendipitous thing as well that also came out of this?
No, I mean, I am a woman. I definitely gravitate towards writing women. I also think carrying with me that idea from Lord of the Rings, where I was like, I felt like there wasn't really much room for me there. And I'm a straight white woman. So for me to have a problem, like, can you imagine what anyone else would have felt like? And one thing going into this world that I really wanted to do, and I think a lot of other authors are doing really well, and maybe not necessarily getting a fair shake and getting as much push publicly, but is show the medieval world and the amount of diversity that existed in our actual medieval world. You know, we have this very white image of it, and it's just incorrect. There was so much more cross-pollination going on. The world was such a crossroads, especially the Mediterranean. So it just feels stupid and unrealistic to have this world and then have it peopled only by people who look like one thing and act like one thing and love like one thing. It just doesn't make any sense. And when you're writing fantasy worlds and things that are unreal, your whole goal is to get the audience to believe it. And one of the ways you make them believe it is to make the world feel real. And I think the world doesn't feel real if it's not diverse. So that was a goal. And also, you know, honestly, no one can write every single identity. No one can write every single creed. You cannot cover everyone in a single book. It's simply not possible. But I think what we should all be striving to do is at least make the possibility of everyone exist in that world. Whereas in Lord of the Rings, you're like, it doesn't seem like there's a possibility for gay people. There's no mention of it existing. You at least want to have that bare minimum so that people can at least think there is room for me in some way.
I find that's so true. I mean, I really loved Lord of the Rings as well, but it is so true that it's hard to project yourself into it when you're not really in there. So I really love,
and that's
I just really love that updated journey.
Thanks.
I feel like I'm also really interested in the mechanics. Just how do you come up with characters? Do you look at pictures of people? Do you have a character sheet?
Yeah, so when I was writing the Red Queen series, I did not have any specific people in mind for my characters. They were sort of like shadowy figures in my brain while I was writing, especially because I was coming off film school and my screenwriting degree. And in screenwriting, you are not trained to describe characters physically. You don't want to exclude any kind of actors. It's more about capturing their energy and description than it is something physical, unless it's important to the plot. So coming into writing novels for the first time, writing novels professionally, I remember I had gone through several edits on my first draft of Red Queen, and my editor was like, just so you know, like, you don't describe characters. I don't know what this main character looks like. Can you like do something about that? And so it was always her kind of pulling that out of me with every subsequent book, and I was getting better and better at it. And when I came to Realmbreaker, people had asked me so many times what people look like, specifically, what actor are they? And I was like, I guess this one's kind of in the zone, but like, I don't want to tell you what to picture. So then going into Realmbreaker, I was like, I'm going to make it easy for them and I'm going to make it easy for myself. And I'm going to pick people for a lot of these characters. So like Democrion to me in my head is Chris Hemsworth as Thor with the long blonde hair. And Cortale and Terraston, as they are twins, is obviously Tom Hiddleston. And specifically, I'm thinking of him in The Hollow Crown. Henry V. Yeah. And I go through on different ones a little bit. Erida's a little bit of Ava Green in my mind.
Oh my gosh, I feel like I need to reread it because
boards, which are private. Maybe one day I'll make them public, but my Pinterest boards for this book are very extensive.
Oh, very interesting. I guess another thing that I found really interesting was just that kind of range of like how different each character was, and that range of motivations, that range of, I guess, connections with the heroes of the past. How was it writing all those POVs? Were there any that you really, really enjoyed or that you found a bit challenging?
Yeah, I really enjoyed writing Erida for the reasons mentioned. A little bit of like cosplaying someone who doesn't have to play by the rules. I obviously love writing Coraine. Coraine is probably the character I've written who is most like me, but also a little bit of an aspirational version of me as well. Coming off of Red Queen, where the characters were teenagers with literal superpowers who were physically very, very strong. I consciously wanted to write a female character, a teenager in my next book who was a hero, but wasn't physically strong, but was still very much that strong female character, because I know a lot of times if the woman isn't literally able to kick your ass, she's not considered a strong female character, which we know is untrue. So for Corinne, it was like, oh, her superpower is her mind. She's really smart and really logical, and she's a polyglot, and all of these things that are actually very helpful. And we get to watch her train and watch her grow and watch her sort of earn that journey to being a hero, a little bit more than someone who's like, oh, by the way, I have superpowers. And then POVs that were challenging. I think Andrew challenges me the most because he is the character who is like capital G good. And his moral compass points true north. And he is always making the decision that's coming from a good place of like kindness and honor and thoughtfulness. So in real life, he's the one we all want to hang out with. In a book filled with all of these morally gray anti-heroes and villains, you have to work really, really hard to make that good person interesting. So I always have to find new ways into like, how does he relate to the other people in the book? What is his arc? What is his struggle? And he's of course unlearning everything that he has learned and all the things that he's been told to want his whole life. And he's finding, you know, intersections of that with the other characters, while also kind of serving as like group therapist. And he's the barista somehow.
Oh my God, I really see.
Having him tell this 500-year-old immortal, like, what you're feeling now is being sad, and it's okay to be sad. Don't just try and ignore it. It's going to suck if you do that.
Oh, I know. I love that dynamic.
Me too.
Oh, we're running out of time before we
I know. We're just like
questions. I'm going to selfishly go to one that I want. I'm writing book 2 of a trilogy at the moment, and I would love to know, do you have any tips for writing series?
Yes. So when I'm writing a story, just like a single novel, I structure it with 3-act 8 sequence, which is film structure. It's what's very familiar to us, especially Western audiences. That's the way a lot of storytelling breaks down in the books that you read, in the movies you consume. So it is already very palatable to our audience, and it's a rhythm that our readers naturally understand. And I find it helps with our storytelling because the reader can feel the beats of the book, even if they don't know it. And I structure trilogies in the same way. So book 1 is act 1, book 2 is act 2, book 3 is act 3. And I find that helps me tell a really cohesive story over the 3 books, while also doing the 3-act structure inside every single story itself. So for second books, act 2 is usually the hardest act to write. But act 2 ends in the worst place for the characters and for the readers, which is always the funnest place for me to be. So I went into Bladebreaker knowing act 2 is really hard. You have no beginning, you have no end, but you still have to tell a cohesive story in this boundary. So I used Empire Strikes Back was really my inspiration. That's the original Star Wars trilogy, also breaks down into that act structure, and Empire Strikes Back happens to be the best of the 3. So it's like, okay, it can happen. You can make number 2 really, really good. Here's how you do it. So that's what I used going into it, and knowing where the book ends. I've also really looked forward to the ending of this book since I started sort of dreaming up the first one. I knew where I wanted it to go, and it feels very natural. I don't want to do any spoilers, but it feels very natural to build up these characters and build up Corinne especially, and build up her reliance upon her new friends, and then start taking those things away. That's what you always want to do. You want to give your characters something and then take it away and make them
Taking notes. All right, I think we've got time for one more question between us. And I just want to ask about the battle scenes, which I really loved.
I'll talk about those.
So many monster battles in here. I think my favorite is the dragon. But I had read that you, for Realmbreaker, had you listened to songs while you were writing the battle scenes. Did you do that for Bladebreaker as well?
Yeah, quite a few. So in Realmbreaker, like the prologue was written entirely to Hell's Bells by AC/DC. So when the bell starts tolling in the story, if you want to hit play on that song, I literally have lines where I'm like, you can hit play on this song here and read at this pace. We'll hear and feel the whole story as I choreograph it. Because I choreograph the music. It helps me get into the rhythm of the scene because it feels much more organic than this. And then I'm seeing, you know, shot for shot exactly what I want the audience to see as well. For Blade Breaker, oh gosh. So the very end, the part with Sarasa and Karain and that sort of chase was written to a song from the Rocky sequel Creed. At the end, when Michael B. Jordan is running, it's a song by Meek Mill called Lord Knows, and it's very high paced and a lot of energy. There's another song by the Ukrainian band Goa called Shum that is the lead up to that final battle in Gedastern, where the Yiddi are there and Valtik is breaking a bone and casting some kind of spell. That song builds really well. Yeah, I have my Spotify playlists are also all public. And I definitely should put something in my newsletter where I did it for Realm Breaker. I'll do it for Blade Breaker, where I have what each scene correlates to in what song. In Realm Breaker, the first chase with Sarasa and Dom, where they first meet, is the Wonder Woman theme.
Oh my gosh, I see it.
There's an electric cello cover by Tina Grau, which is really incredible. She does a lot of like movie scores and video game covers, which is what I write to a lot of. Sometimes I have a hard time writing to music with lyrics, but soundtrack music is really evocative and really, really helpful.
So are you listening to it as you're writing it?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of, sometimes I just like turn it off and I trance out and I have to see it in my head and hear it in my head. And sometimes I'm moving with the music. I have a playlist I call Finish Line that is also super upbeat and high energy, a lot of like electronic dance music when I'm like in the last chapter of the whole story, or if I'm editing the last portion, I'm at the deadline and I need to hit it, I will turn on that playlist. But I also, when I'm walking, will listen to music and know what kind of scene I need and know like, oh, this battle is coming up. It has these people in it. They have to do this. They have to get through this. And I start that. It's almost like starting a computer program where you have all your parameters and you hit go. And I will put on the music and hit go and think, okay, now what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And I will play it over and over again and choreograph the scene to the music and then try and put that in a book.
I can't wait to check out that Spotify list. I feel like I have to have Chris Hemsworth in my mind now. I have to be like playing with a experience.
It helps me so much. It feels like cheating. It feels like I have a bit of a crutch, but it works.
Yeah. All right. I think it is time for audience questions.
Oh,
yay. All right. We've got a question from Caitlin who asks, how do you approach writing dialogue and making it believable?
So screenwriting, dialogue is king in terms of when you're writing in prose, it's a little bit different, but in screenwriting, most of what you are writing is dialogue. So that probably helped. What is also very, very helpful is to read your lines out loud and make sure they sound like something an actual person would say. Because there's definitely lines of dialogue that I have read and been like, that's not how a person speaks. How would this actually be said? So that is helpful, just to repeat it to yourself. And also you really just have to know your characters really well and who they are. If your audience is like, that character wouldn't say that, then you've hit a problem. You want to be consistent with who the characters are when you're writing their dialogue.
All right. I think, okay, very exciting. Is there, Panya asks, is there a Red Queen TV show movie update? I can't wait to see my comfort characters come to life.
Me too. And I'm fingers crossed because I am extremely superstitious. So I'm one of those people who won't say it's happening until it's like physically happening in front of me. I can't say too much. A lot of the adaptation entertainment game is a lot of being quiet, not saying anything until you can say everything. But I can say that I am very involved. I'm really, really happy with where we are in the process. We have a fantastic team, and it is still the team that has wanted to tell this story from the very beginning. Like everyone is still very, very dedicated to it, which is kind of shocking and surprising for the film industry. Usually when a book has taken this long, they've passed through several different places. And to have the same people still going to bat for it and fighting for it and wanting to be a part of it is really flattering. And it's also cool because I know one of the reasons, besides the fact that the team loves the story, they're also business people. They're sticking around because you guys have stuck around and made that series incredibly successful. and shown your support for it and shown that there's an audience for the show. That's like the thing that you can control, is to show the business people that there is a consumer. As like scientific and cold as that sounds, that is what all of this revolves around. We want to tell the story. We want to make it great. I'm real. One of the cool things about developing the show has been that I can improve on what I did. And it's been really interesting to go back with the eyes I have now as a writer and knowing like, oh my God, I could have done that. Or to have someone else look at the story and be like, well, what about this instead? And you realize like, oh my God, that was such a better story choice. Absolutely. So hopefully, fingers crossed, you get to see it. And I've said this before, but I know a lot of people say, you know, don't do it unless it's 100% faithful. 100% faithful adaptations from books do not make good movies or television shows. And I'm on the side of a good adaptation, not a faithful one, because I think good is better than 100% faithful, because it won't be good.
I think we've slightly answered this question from Bridget, but I'll ask again in case you have any extra insights. Do you have any song associations for your books/characters? And if so, what are some?
Oh no, that's fine. So for Democrion, he has his own playlist and there's some like Celtic music in there. Sarasa has a lot of like Kanye West music, very like powerful, similar to Evangeline's playlist from Red Queen, actually. Erida had some really good music. Scene-wise, another one, the canyon chase at the end of Realmbreaker when they're racing in the horse herd, that was written to the Mad Max Fury Road specifically like the theme song Brothers in Arms, and that choreographed a lot of like, I figured out, oh my God, they're gonna hit a rock and this one has to jump to this horse, or oh my God, they have to hold on to the bellies of the horses that they're running. Oh my God, the arrows are gonna start firing at this point. And that's how I figure out the scenes.
Okay, N. Randolph asks, how do you come up with your character arcs? I always find the way your characters grow and change very interesting.
Thank you. A lot of it is just starting with a character that you know who they are, you know their background. I like to say that my characters are rats that I have raised and created and designed. And then I have a maze, which is the story that I have also created. And I take those rats and I know them very well and I put them at the beginning of the maze. And then I just record them running the maze in a way that is organic to that particular rat. I have to like build and grow them with the story while I'm writing them. I do know where I want everyone to end up plot wise, but character wise, there's a lot of room to move, because sometimes you're thinking, I want this character to become this person and make this choice. And you can't get them there in the amount of time you thought you needed, or something else has to happen, or they surprise you. Erida had a moment in Bladebreaker that was surprising, but also really helped get her character where it needs to be. The thing she does with the the Madrentian princess.
Loved it.
That moment wasn't written in the outline. It was more something that I was about to write the scene, and I kind of like will do a rough outline of each chapter before I write it. And I realized, oh my God, this is going to happen. She's going to do this because that's where she's at now. And I think it represents a huge turn in her character and her arc. And it comes back to the number one thing, everything has to be believable to the audience. So you have to work to make sure that those arcs feel organic and real to the character that you have established for your audience, because the times when they're like, hey, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense, or hey, wait a second, I don't quite believe that. Those are moments where like the person, the reader, is being taken out of the world of the story, taken out of the pages, and you never want that jarring experience, because if it happens too many times, they're not going to keep reading.
We have, I have to say that moment with the princess was very unexpected. Amazing.
I loved it.
I loved it. We've got a question from Kylie who asks, does the name Coraine have a special meaning to you, given you've used it in both of your series? That's such a good question.
Yeah, and I didn't really realize it until I was writing it, but I just really gravitate towards that prefix of COR. And then there's another series I want to write where one of the main kingdoms starts with COR, and I'm realizing like girl, what's going on here? But no, there's no specific meaning. It's just what pops into my head. A lot of my character names are constructed with thought towards like what culture they're from, what language do they speak, what part of the world are they from, and I will try and filter through those things. Coraine and her father Cortail are of Old Core, that sort of ancient empire, and I always knew I was using that 3-letter prefix there to kind of indicate that. But I can't remember why it popped into my head. Just I know I love that and I gravitate towards it.
Love it. Okay, Jennifer asks, do you have any idea how you want the series to end?
Yeah, so there's the whole idea, are you a plotter or are you a pantser? And plotters outline everything and pantsers write by the seat of their pants. There's another metaphor that I'm going to steal from George R.R. Martin, which is architects and gardeners. Architects have the floor plan of the house and then they build the house. Gardeners plant seeds and then they watch them grow. I like to say that I am a gardener who plants tomatoes. So I put the stake in the ground. I know the general line of where they're going to grow, and then there are things that I discover along the way. So I always know where they end. I know where they begin. I like to know my midpoints. I like to know my end of Act 2. So those are always really helpful to me, and the first things that I nail down when I'm trying to tell a story, either for a singular book or for a series. So going into Red Queen, I didn't know as much as I should have. I definitely thought that series was going to be 3 books, and it ended up being 4 once I realized I can't get to the ending I want in this amount of books. And then going into Realmbreaker, that was something I carried with me of, okay, you really got to know what you're doing and where the beats are and how they're going to hit. So I knew I am writing 3 books. Over my dead body will this be 4 books? But yes, I am very much someone who needs to know where I'm going. It's almost like I have a flashlight and I am in the cave and I have a map, but it's dark. So sometimes I'm going to go into little corners.
That is so funny, because my critique partner and I often say that sometimes when there's a little bit of a bit where we don't know what's going on, we hold a candle in the dark. We know
Yes.
what's going on just ahead of us, but not the full road yet.
Yes.
We've got a question from Lauren, who asks, how do you come up with the names for your characters? I guess we've heard a bit about Coraine, but what about the others?
Yeah, definitely I'm always taking into account where the character is from, what language they speak. My sort of cheat for that, well, first I'll say I always want the character names to kind of jump out to the reader in a way that identifies who the character is before they really know anything. So in Red Queen, all of the Silvers had very Latin, sort of Imperial Roman inspired names. So you could kind of pick out, or more complicated names, you could pick out that person's a Silver because of their name. And it's just another way to make the story a little bit easier for a reader to digest, because they are dense books and they have a lot of moving parts. And then going into Realmbreaker, same thing. I wanted them to be able to identify, well, that person's an immortal because they've got that name, or that person's from Evolve because they've got that name. So it takes a little bit of language building, but I'm also not Tolkien, so I don't have the brain power or the time to build whole languages. So I use a cheat, and I picked it up somewhere and I can't remember where. But it's easy to identify, not necessarily building the language or building the words, but to say this language uses these certain letters and these certain letter groupings and these sounds, and they don't use these letters. And then once you have that set, you can build names and words that will immediately become identified as like, oh, that's Yiddy because they use Y's in the middle of their words and they use J's in this way and they don't use this other letter. I have it all written down in my Scrivener research, but it helps. And it's an easy way to narrow down. I have this character, they're from this place. What kind of name do I want? And then you can play the feeling it out name game within certain boundaries.
Love it.
I know for Dom that I wanted to make fun of the whole super complicated fantasy name. And I wanted him to have a name that even the characters are like, I'm not going to do that.
Isabel asks, who is your favorite character in the series?
I love all my children equally. Parents say when they're lying. But it really depends on what kind of writing mood I'm in. And it's the same thing for the Red Queen series, where some days I feel like a Mare, some days I feel like an Evangeline, some days I love writing Maven. And then for Realmbreaker, it's the same. You know, some days it's Coraine. Most of the time it's Sarasa, because again, she's someone who you can really sort of live out your fantasies with, who doesn't want to be a badass, cynical bounty hunter or assassin in the middle of a kind of ridiculous like fantasy quest, who's the only one who can say, guys, we do actually need to kill that person because they're going to go tell the enemy where we are. And I don't give a shit about any of this bravery, nobility crap. I use her a lot to poke fun at the fantasy tropes that we all know and love, but if there was one realistic person in the team, they'd be like, really? You named your sword? It's kind of weird.
We have an anonymous attendee who has a question. They ask, what is your revision process like for your books?
So I'm lucky in that so far in my career, God knows how it's going to go. I write pretty clean first drafts in that character choices and plot and world really don't change. They will be honed, but I've never had a moment where my editor has said, nope, that thing can't happen, or that character can't die, or this part isn't, that's something has never happened where in Act 2 I need to change something and it has changed Act 3 entirely. I've never had to do like huge rewrites in that way, thank God. So my edits, I usually do 2 rounds of content edits with my editor, where it's more about telling the story that's already there in the most efficient way, in a way that gets the reader as close to my experience as possible. I find that one of the best parts about the editing process, besides getting a second person and a third person, my agent gives me notes as well, to see the story and be like, yes, I did understand what you're saying, or no, here's how we can make it get there, is getting the fresh eyes myself. When I finish a draft, I don't do like CPs, I don't do critique partners or anything, or beta readers. It goes right to my agent, it goes right to my editor, because I'm usually right up against my deadline. And then I don't look at it until I get that edit letter back from my editor, which is usually about 2 months. So I have 2 months to let that part of my brain recharge, refill the well, and then come back to the story with the fresh eyes that make me about as close to the reader as possible, so I can experience the story in the way a reader would, without my own biases as much as possible. And it helps me realize, like, one, that thing's wrong and here's how I'm going to fix it because I now understand it. Or it's a lot of confidence too, because I'm sure you agree, when you finish a draft, you're like, that was garbage. Why does anyone need to do this? This is the end of my career. No one will ever read this book. It's terrible. And then you get it back and you think, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was. I can work with this. Or, oh my God, I totally forgot I wrote that great line. So it's nice. I love getting the fresh eyes and going back and reading something for the first time.
We have a question from Shannon, who asks, how much research do you do about geographic locations to influence the world building in your books?
Pretty much as I need. I had a lot of reference books. I'm a big Wikipedia diver. If we're in a certain, I did my maps started, originally I started doing the maps with tectonic plates and then realized that is way too far from the geologic process. You do not need to do that. But I did do like weather patterns and wind patterns and ocean currents to figure out the biomes and like what's going to be humid, hot, and tropical, what's going to be dry, hot, and desert, which was all a lot of fun. But it's a lot of doing that, setting the stage, knowing the stage, and then going into the story and realizing, what kind of plants are they passing by? Okay, let me Google. What kind of plants exist in this kind of desert, in this kind of biome? Great, got it. Okay, it smells like this, it looks like this. I can definitely Google in the moment when I need it. So it's a little bit of knowing everything first, but then giving room for discovery, which is how I like to write everything.
My copy didn't come with the map, but I absolutely love that map. I feel like it's beautiful.
I get really indignant for the readers overseas who get the books without the maps in them, because I think, you must be so damn confused. I'm so smart. These books really don't work without the map.
They work without the map. But the map is beautiful. I had a look at it online. Okay, we've got a question from another anonymous attendee. The ideas and entire universes you create for your books are insanely well thought out and imaginative. Is it ever difficult for you to fabricate these false realities? How are your ideas inspired?
Well, I've been creating false realities in my head since I was like since I was conscious, which I think a lot of writers can relate to. I think we're all here creating stories and being writers because there's a little part of us that kind of feels disconnected from the world we live in, and this is how we connect and make sense of it. So the world building part is something I love so much. I'm down to get gritty with the roadmaps and figure out the trade routes of salt. But the challenge for me is to figure out when to stop doing that, because eventually you will burn out your enthusiasm for a story on the world building side, on things that the reader doesn't need. To be fair, there are things that you need and things that I know that will never go into those books, but very much help me tell the story and understand the world a little bit better. But my ideas kind of come from everywhere. I am very much inspired by the world that already exists. I think it's really hard to write a fantasy story that is not inspired by the real world, because as I've said so many times, we write stories that hinge on belief, on making readers believe the unbelievable. So you have to use things they understand and touchstones that we all connect to in certain ways to help them along in metabolizing the story.
I feel like this one, I really was so interested in how deep the history was in the book. You had that really old lost world, and you had that world of the heroes, and then the current world of the heroes. I was really curious how much world building you did of that kind of lost world. Was it all on the page?
I have a second map that is actually the map of what the old empire looked like in the different provinces and the names of cities as it was in that age. So I could trace, well, which names were going to be kind of similar, which were going to change entirely because the language system had changed in that area. So a lot, I felt like I had to, that was the basement, the foundation. I had to build at least that in a less intense way, but enough that I could build on top of it and not have it collapse. So that was cool. But I was very much inspired, and still am, and was in Red Queen as well, with the idea of the Dark Ages, sort of like the fall of Rome, the power vacuum left behind when this gigantic empire that is the quote like center of the world, the light and the reason is gone. And how do we try and fill that? So that's very much the inspirational jumping off point for the world, where we have characters like Erida, who leads a kingdom that is like, no, we're the next ones up. We are now going to be the center of the world, and here's how we're going to do it. I love that whole idea and that time period. And I think we're kind of witnessing it again with like the fall of the American Empire. So again, maybe something I'm subconsciously dealing with.
Are you ever going to post that map? I would love to see that one.
I should. I think I maybe did on like a blog post like years ago, but who knows?
All right, we have, I think, time for maybe one or two more questions.
It's great.
We have a question from another anonymous attendee. Oh, wait.
Yes.
Oh, I'm trying to look at all the upvoted ones. I think one of them just got jumped up. Sarah asks, aside from the books you've written, what are your favorite books that you have read?
Ooh, okay. So I finished a few. One thing the pandemic has done to me, I know a lot of writers have struggled with writing. I have struggled with reading a lot since the pandemic started. My focus has been totally shot, and I always feel like I sit down to read and then I immediately want to reach for my phone. And I know part of that is like just feeling general anxiety, but also I have to be on so many social media platforms now as part of the job, and I feel like that part of my brain chemistry has changed, not for the better. But I finished a few weeks ago, She Who Became the Sun.
Oh, it's one of my really good friends. Yeah.
Oh my God, that book was so good. And I got to the end of it. I'm also like a total Mulan fan. I grew up with Mulan being my favorite Disney princess. So I got to the end of that book and did not know that it was not a standalone. And I kind of was like, what the hell? Why would you do this to me? And then I immediately went to Google and it said it's duology. I was like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you. I will wait. I will wait patiently for number 2, but I loved that book.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to tell Shelley.
Oh, I have tagged. I'm a total fangirl, and I follow her on Instagram.
I'm going to tell her as soon as we finish this.
And then probably in the last 10 years, the book that captured me in a way that books hadn't since I was a teenager was The Bear and the Nightingale by Catherine Arden. That was, I felt like those books just grabbed me by the neck. And I loved the world building in them. I loved the setting of this fantasy Russia, but it's also historically Russia. And there are little like pieces of history slotted in. So you believed like this could have existed. I loved the main character. I loved the world. I loved the side characters, and I loved the romance. And it just like every piece of that story, the animal characters. Oh my God, that was the last book that I threw and was generally like upset about something that happened in the 3rd book.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. I think we have run out of time for questions. Yeah, just thank you so much, Victoria. That was just such a fun chat. And congratulations again. Thank you to everybody who came to celebrate Victoria's new book, Blade Breaker. Oh, got to face the camera. Yes.
You got the book. You're the more professional one here.
I'll hold them both up. And thank you so much to Barnes & Noble for hosting, Gina and Harry, who are behind the scenes. Thank you to everyone from HarperCollins who's here. And Blade Breaker is available right now in stores in Barnes & Noble and also on bn.com. And I believe there are also links in the chat for you to follow. Victoria, do you have any last words?
All I have right now is gratitude for every single one of you. I'm in that weird headspace where I'm not like accepting what reality is. So I'm sure I'll come down to it eventually, but thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. Your questions were fantastic, and it's always lovely to just chat with other authors, even if it's Zoom. I hope we can cross paths in the future for real, and maybe you can like get me with Shelley.
I'm sure.
Anyways, and thank you, of course, to Barnes & Noble. They have always been so supportive and so fantastic and really great at getting us together when we couldn't be together. I do have one more Barnes & Noble event this weekend on Saturday in Bozeman, Montana. So if you are anywhere near Bozeman, come check it out. And thank you to HarperCollins and everybody on the team, and of course, all of the readers out there. I feel so grateful, but also so incredibly greedy because you guys keep giving me so much. And I keep saying like, here's another book, do it again.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Run to your bookshop or run to online to go and check this out if you haven't already.
Thank you guys so much. I really hope you enjoy the new one.
All right, bye.